Maybe
good.
that's the intro.
Yeah, that's the intro. Hello.
Hello,
We
hello,
are here.
Joey, my friend. How are you doing?
Doing well, man. How you doing, Ben?
Doing fantastic. I'm very excited to be here with you, recording our very first episode of the Hoth Hangout podcast. Super excited to be able to share this experience of something we both love, and that of movies and TV shows and Star Wars. Although I know we're not completely decided on the fact if this is going to be a Star Wars exclusive thing or not, but we do both love Star Wars.
Well, we know that every Star Wars project going forward will be a part of it, so.
True, very true. We have the intention of covering Ahsoka and the next season of Mando. So, and Tales of the Jedi. Did you see the trailer for that, by the way?
I did. I was completely shocked.
I was, yeah,
I had no idea something like that was even coming, which
yeah.
was great.
So I knew of it, but I had like very little idea or information that it was gonna be like what the trailer showed us it was gonna be. And
Right.
now I'm arguably more excited for that. I think I am more excited for that than Mando season 3, actually.
Yeah, I think because I jumped in kind of late with the Clone Wars, admittedly. Um, I jumped in after the run on Netflix was done, and but I learned to really love that era. Before that, I was kind of on the fence with it, it being a prequel type of thing. But after watching the entirety of Clone Wars, that's when I really got into it. Of course, you got new characters like Ahsoka in there, and you dive into people like Barriss Offee and all these other great characters. So now to kind of see that all come back again, we got Ashley Eckstein back as well as Ahsoka. Mm-hmm. So I mean, it's just it really it made me real happy that I didn't even know that was something I wanted. But yeah, I'm excited for that.
Yeah,
for sure.
For sure. Lots of fun stuff on the horizon, Star Wars wise. But I guess before we get into the Star Wars stuff, a little bit about the both of us. I'm Ben, and this is my good friend Joey. Joey and I actually met through Twitch, a gaming and streaming platform, and that has been kind of the origin of our friendship. And over the course of time, we both quickly realized that we had a love and passion for Star Wars amongst just movies and I think TV in general, which prompted us to go along with this idea that I think has been in the works for a bit, but of forming this podcast. So I guess a fun fact about me in relation to the podcast, my dog's name is actually Ahsoka. So back to what you were talking about with the Clone Wars stuff, that definitely holds a special place in my heart too.
Right. Yes. Yeah, and I'm Joey. As Ben mentioned, we met on Twitch. He was doing some Fall Guys for all those Fall Guys gamers and viewers out there. Ben was one of the OG tournament holders, so that's how I originally met Ben. But yeah, just like Ben said, we connected we connected through there, and you could tell that there was a good bond between us after we had some good discussions, both online and offline and stuff like that. So. And then with the Star Wars stuff, yeah, it just kind of all fell into place. He has a channel in his Discord that I was active in, and we were always talking about Star Wars stuff. But yeah, it was but for me, yeah, I've been watching Star Wars since I was a kid. I remember when, and this will age me a little bit, but I saw Return of the Jedi in the theaters with my brother. So that's kind of where I come from. I've seen a lot of it. My favorite character in all of Star Wars is Lando Calrissian.
Nice.
And my favorite figure is the one of him in the Skiff Guard. The Skiff Guard.
That's the Return of the Jedi outfit,
in Return
right?
of the Jedi
Yeah.
one, right? Yes. So that's my favorite figure of him because I remember when I was growing up, my brother had one, and it was cool because it had the helmet, it had the staff, and so you had all these little pieces that you could play with. So yeah, that's definitely my favorite figure, my favorite actor, and my favorite character in Star Wars. So to have that kind of early on, those memories growing up, and Star Wars is about the kids and their generation of Star Wars. We've got from many years of Star Wars, and we all have our own like Star Wars like crew. So mine is Han and Leia and Lando. But yeah, so yeah, that's me. And the funny thing about me and Ben was the way he asked me to about this particular podcast to join in on it. He sent me a message on Discord at about 6 or 7 p.m. and wasn't able to get to it right away. But he would say, "Hey, we want to do this, and let's start this up finally." And I said, "Yeah, let's do this." But I didn't even respond yet. He ended up streaming like an hour later, and then I said, "Hey," in his chat, I said, "Hey, yeah, I'm down for this." And he's like, "Oh, good. I already have a name and a logo and all that stuff ready for this." And I'm like, I didn't even respond yet, So you could tell that the passion is there between the two of us as far as the things that we really love to do. Creating these types of content is one of them. So, no, I'm super excited that we finally got a chance to get together and do something like this.
Definitely, yeah. And just as like a Star Wars fan in general, it's fun to just be able to hang out and talk about Star Wars with other people who also have a passion for it, which was really probably the main driving force for wanting to do something like this. Was because I know I know you love Star Wars, I love Star Wars, and so but also allow others an opportunity to kind of listen in and partake in that love and that passion of something that we enjoy as well. And hopefully they get an enjoyment out of listening to the podcast. So welcome once again to the Hoth Hangout podcast, and moving forward, I guess a little bit into the Star Wars related content, particularly Andor, the show which just came out last night. Joey, what were your thoughts going into the show? What did you think before even hitting play on that first episode? What were your excitement levels, particularly when it comes to Andor compared to maybe something like Mando season 3 or anything we've seen recently like Obi-Wan?
I think that one of my favorite movies is Rogue One, from the Star Wars movies. Probably a top 3 for me.
Best Disney
So
movie, I would say. Best movie Disney has produced, in my opinion, since
right,
purchasing the
yeah,
rights to Star Wars.
right, yeah. Did my camera go out at all there for a second or no?
I didn't notice it if it did. No,
Okay, okay,
yeah.
sorry. No, because my monitors went off for a second, so
No, you're
I'll
good.
start over again. Um, yeah. So one of my favorite movies is Rogue One, top 3 for sure. Uh, so all of the characters really hold a good spot in the Star Wars universe for me. Andor obviously being one of them, and seeing Andor early on in Rogue One, you see where the rebellion's at. They were really kind of gritty. They were just that whole movie, and it's probably cliche at this time, but in comparison to all the other Star Wars movies, it was like the kind of the darkest, the kind of the real stuff that you would see within like war and all of that. So to have somebody plucked out of that world, because you don't have the Jedi and the Sith, the people that the an average person would know a Darth Vader, they would know a Luke Skywalker, but would they know a Cassian Andor? Probably not. Um, so I think going into this, I was excited to see what kind of content it would bring, what kind of story I think what kind of story it was going to bring. Because Rogue One blew me away because I didn't really have much expectation for Rogue One. So now that kind of is placed so high on my Star Wars movie list, I was very excited for to see what this was going to do. I don't know from uh, generally speaking, like everyone else's view on it, if they were excited at all, if or anything like that. But I was excited to see the story and how it was going to kind of link up into everything else that we know about the Rogue One characters. Obviously, in particular, Cassian Andor. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that was kind of what I was waiting for, what I was looking for in it. because lately, it seems like Disney, kind of in general, has been doing a lot of good, um, crossovers between some of their properties. I mean, like in Marvel, for instance, there's all of these different TV shows, all of these movies coming out, but they do a really good job, obviously, with like the Avengers, um, how they cross over into other movies and stuff like that. I've been wanting to see something like that in Star Wars. So once I saw things like Ahsoka showing up in live action, for instance,
Yeah.
that was huge.
I think we
You
all
know,
freaked
Cad,
out when we first saw
yeah,
that happen.
exactly. So when you saw Cad Bane also, he was in Boba Fett, right? So you saw Cad
Yeah.
Bane
Yeah.
in there. So and those were animated characters now come to life. So
Right.
just those things for the fans of Star Wars to see it come to fruition, I think is huge. So this is what this I hope to see, kind of interweave the Rogue One, Cassian Andor, A New Hope, all of the Star Wars stuff kind of overlap, Clone Wars, whatever.
Hmm.
So that's kind of that was my expectation going in. So I was pretty high. So I guess to answer your question, pretty high going in. And that was just my personal expectation about it.
Yeah. I would say, and as a general rule with all movies, I think I tend to think this about movies a lot, and I think the sequels are a good example of this. I think
Mhm.
the higher the expectation of the movie, not always, but more often than not, I think the movie tends to be set up for failure, or TV show if it's a TV
Mhm.
show. I think that like the sequels are the perfect example of that. I mean, you could talk about kind of some poor story, decisions with
Mm.
the sequels, but
Mhm.
um, yeah, like I think because Andor is not like a main line, like a mainstream Star Wars thing that like maybe the average Star Wars fan would be interested in. Like you mentioned Obi-Wan, and someone who hasn't seen anything Star Wars, other than maybe Mandalorian, is like, "Oh, I'm going to watch Obi-Wan because I know who Obi-Wan is." But you mentioned Andor and they're like, "Who's Andor? I'm not going to watch that." And so already going into it, you've lost a tiny portion of the average crowd of viewers. So it doesn't have that same expectation that something like Obi-Wan or Mandalorian or even Ahsoka does. And so I tend to have the mindset that going into a show, the shows that don't have that level of like, oh my gosh, this is going to be the next big thing, often tend to be the best shows. And I loved, not to already get into the episode, but I loved it personally. But I could see how someone who is kind of expecting something more Disney, I guess, for lack of a better
Yeah,
way of putting
catered
it.
catered
Yes,
catered to a certain audience,
I
right?
I could see how
To the wide audience.
exactly. This is definitely the first 3 episodes did not strike me as that. In fact, if you're not if you didn't like Rogue One, you probably didn't like the first 3 episodes of Andor. I haven't actually met too many people that have said, "Oh, I hated Rogue One." But I guess if you didn't like them for whatever reason, this would be a lot harder of a show to get into. Um, but in terms of pre-show excitement, ironically, I think my excitement for Tales of the Jedi and Mandalorian and Ahsoka are probably still more, but because the general audience hype levels on Andor weren't as high, I think that elevated my excitement for the show, if that makes sense.
Yes,
Yeah.
because it's based off of experience and what
Right.
what we've seen.
And there's not
Not only with Star Wars, but pretty much anything.
right. There's not like this sense of pressure that it has to live up to some like massive expectation. It can just be what it is. And I think we saw that. Like, it's definitely different from anything else we've seen from Star Wars so far.
Yes, I would agree.
Yeah. With having said that, one of the main differences right off the bat that you see in the first probably 15 minutes of the first episode, is Andor being put in this position, uh, where maybe minor spoiler, he gets into this little fight with two people and things end up going awry and he has to make this split second decision and maybe it's not the best decision that he makes, but that in particular strikes me as a decision that is not a quote unquote Disney decision,
Right.
which could
Right.
maybe lose a general audience member. I don't know, but I personally I like the grittiness and the almost a darkness tone to the show so far.
Yeah, and it was perfect parallel to his introduction in Rogue One. I mean,
Yes.
it was almost the same type of thing. He was in a CD type of area, and he was in the middle of he was in the middle of some problems, and he had to make a decision where you could tell. You know, this is obviously before Rogue One. He had to stop. He took a beat. He thought about it, and he's like, I can't. I have to get away with this. So he ended up shooting the second officer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, whereas in Rogue One, he knew right away when he was talking with that spy about in Rogue One, he's talking with the spy about the pilot that defected from the Empire. I think that's what that was, right? I think that's I think that's what they were talking about. He knew right away that he was going to have to shoot him, you know,
Yeah.
and so there was no beat. He knew he when they got cornered by the stormtroopers in Rogue One, he said, "Well, I need to get rid of this guy." So he got his information, shot him, and he was gone. You know, so but you could see the struggle, the little bit of conflict in what he had to do this time. So I thought that was kind of a interesting way to introduce. You know, like you said, in literally the first 10, 15 minutes, this is something he
Right.
had to do. You know,
Someone who's intended to be the protagonist of the show making the decision to kill someone. You're like, oh, it it forces the viewer to question like, do I want to root for this guy? You know what I mean?
right? Yeah, and those are often the more interesting characters
Yeah, I
because
totally agree.
as a viewer, you're like exactly what you said. Am I supposed to be on this guy's side? You
Yeah,
know, and
yes,
especially if you hadn't seen Rogue One, you weren't expecting that to happen.
right.
He got cornered there, I'm like, well, I know what's gonna happen to these two, you know. So, um, but like we were saying, as a general audience member, maybe not knowing that history,
Right.
or I guess future, technically speaking, of Andor, um, you wouldn't have seen that. So yeah, I thought that was a great way to introduce him in the series.
Something I've been wanting from Star Wars for a long time now, because we have it, but we don't explore it as much. I think Rebels was actually the first show to do this, but I like when shows in general, not just Star Wars, explore morally gray characters or morally gray situations. For example, like Rebels, we see that a bit with like the Bendu storyline, like what is balance, what is good, what is bad. Qui-Gon is another good example of this. I'm hoping we get some of that with the Ahsoka show as well. And Andor somewhat strikes me as fitting into this category of grayness a little bit, which is why
Mhm.
I think I connect with the character a lot. If this was something, where he's running around like, you know, kind of like a not that Batman is this way, but Batman has that rule where he's like, I don't kill people. You know what I mean?
Right,
Uh,
right,
I am attracted to moral grayness in a show's character. I think it draws
right,
me in. It grounds the show in realism, and like we've said a couple times already, it doesn't feel Disneyified.
right. And I think you said the perfect word, realism. I
Hmm.
mean, nobody is. It's never black and white. It's never like in real life.
Yeah,
It's never black and white. You know, there's always several shades of gray in the middle. You know, so um, but this is but because it's entertainment, you're never gonna throw somebody directly. Yeah, I mean, you will throw somebody directly in the dark, in the black, in the white, or even in this case, right in the gray. You know,
yeah,
because you can't have the ambiguity of like who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. But in the gray areas, obviously you can. So like we've said, it makes it a more interesting character.
yeah. I think the reason morally gray characters draw the audience in is because rather than like seeing a character who's already been on the journey to get to the point of good or bad, you're experiencing the journey with them. Not that they're even necessarily working towards a good or bad point. They're just kind of operating within the gray, and you're experiencing that as the viewer, which I personally enjoy a lot. And then with the actual episodes, another thought that I had was there a particular character, maybe other than Andor, that stuck out to you um as someone who you think will really make the show or even take it to the next level moving forward with the next few episodes?
I have a feeling that character Bix will.
I was
The
gonna go for the same
Yeah,
character if I'm being
yeah. So
honest.
Bix, I mean, she shows that fearlessness of what she needs to do to be able to get the job done. Um, I mean, at the end of it, we saw how um, the she saw Tim get destroyed essentially by the Empire,
Yeah.
and
R.I.P.
you know, yeah, right. I mean, that was real fast. So yeah, it's funny because whenever you see like you watch a show, well, I do this personally. When I watch a show, and I think this is Game of Thrones. This is
Yeah,
what
you're
that show
you're
has done
picking
to me.
out who's not gonna make it to the end.
Who's Someone's not making it here. Who is it going to be? Um, but yeah. So I thought unfortunately, yeah, he's probably going to go after he snitched on on Andor, essentially. So I'm like, well, he's probably the one. But yeah, but going back to Bix, I think she's the one that will. I want to see how her story ends out as well because obviously she's not there at Rogue One, um, but she plays. You could see obviously there's a connection with her and Andor, um, and what there's some history there. So there's definitely I'm sure they'll dive into that quite a bit. But I think she'll be an important person, an important character in the well.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that her character a lot, and I would probably just echo what you just said. I think as a whole though, the first three episodes, and maybe this is jumping the gun a little bit, but I think one of my criticisms of the first three episodes is that, and I don't even necessarily want to consider it a criticism because I like the fact that they took it this direction. But it didn't feel at all times like I was watching a Star Wars show, if that makes sense. Like it almost
Yeah.
felt like a character study sometimes of Andor
Mm-hmm.
and like kind of like a background analysis on his childhood at certain points of the show.
Right. Yeah.
And so I
Mm-hmm.
can, and this adds to what we were talking about before with like the average viewer, I could see not enjoy like this. You know how some movies, the movies that win the Oscars, um,
Yeah.
typically are the ones that have like 97% critic reviews, and then it's like 60% of the audience liked it. That's how I feel this show is. In the sense that it it feels like a very well made show, but like the average watcher or moviegoer would not be as high on it as a critic might be.
Right. No, that's a good point. I mean, the what I loved about this series, these first three episodes, is that it feels like it's going somewhere. I guess
Hmm.
the first three episodes kind of move pretty swiftly. I thought, um, we already have um a good. I mean, in the what hour and a half, 2 hours of this that we've already seen, we have a pretty good understanding of Cassian
Hmm.
and kind of where what he grew up in at Canary,
Right.
and then how he ended up getting to remind me of the name of that planet. Is it Phoenix? Is that where they were? Oh, Ferrix, I mean.
Yes, I
Yeah,
believe that's the
Ferrix. Yeah,
correct name.
Ferrix.
Yes.
Yeah. So if in the Ferrix on the Ferrix planet, and so I mean already there, and this is what I like about the TV series versus the movies because you can get, I mean, if we're gonna get what 10, 12 episodes of this,
Yeah,
whatever
allows
it
you the
is,
opportunity to explore the characters in a
right?
way that they deserve.
There's a lot of time to get into it, and even in just the 2 hours that we've gotten, I'm completely caught up. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like I'm caught up with where Cassian is in his
Yep.
development, and where he is, and obviously watching Rogue One, we know where it ends. You know where it ends up for him as well. So this fills in that gap really well. Now I don't know if this is meant to butt up up against Rogue One. I'm not sure the time of all of
So,
that.
so I do know the answer to that actually.
Okay.
And I can. I'm pretty. I'm like almost 100% sure this is correct. I think it was announced that a season 2 is coming for Andor,
Okay.
and that the end
Okay.
of season 2 will essentially lead directly into Rogue One. So
See,
we are
I mean
getting
that
we are getting another season.
right. So like I was saying earlier, that crossover, like just easily going into. I'll tell you what. When Rogue One ended with Leia
Yeah,
on
that was pretty cool.
the ship, that was incredible. You know, like you knew what was going to happen.
Yeah,
Because up until that point, I don't think. Yeah, because all we had at that point were the prequels, and obviously those were way before anything before New Hope. You know, but that was the first time anything had butt up right up against in the movies, obviously in the
yeah.
movies where it kind of butt up right up against it. Now in Clone Wars, the animated series, obviously there was
The final
some
season,
in
the
the middle. So
intertwining
yeah,
and of the
right,
Revenge of the Sith pieces, that was pretty
yes,
cool.
right. That was pretty incredible,
Yeah,
right? So, but as far as the movies, you never seen it there. So to have like the TV series kind of do the same thing, it's that interweaving that I really love about Star Wars.
yeah,
Uh,
definitely. Another character who we haven't seen yet in the show, but has been advertised as being a cast member for Andor. And to touch on the interweaving is Saw Gerrera, who we've seen
mhm.
both in live action and in animated forms so far. But how many episodes into the show do you think we get before we get to see Saw? I feel like it's got to be pretty soon. I think
Yeah, the fact now that we see what's that dude's name that came in?
Luthen,
Luthen, yeah.
yeah,
Because the fact that he's already involved, because I mean, this is the start of him being a part of the rebellion, like real, right? So I think
right.
that's
Which
that's where we are.
has Luthen? I don't think he has. Andor doesn't really. He has an idea of who Luthen is, but I don't think Luthen has explicitly told him yet. Is that correct?
About who Luthen is,
Right.
about who he is himself. I don't
Yeah.
think so.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously, with us knowing where things are going, I would assume that that's
Right. You can tell,
that's where we
that
head.
he's
Yeah,
he's somewhat aligned or affiliated with the rebels. It would seem, or I don't even know if at this point in time they would be the rebels or not.
right. That's true. That's true. That's true. Because I mean, this is kind of Saw Gerrera's mercenaries or whatever you want to call it. I think that's kind of where we are. So one thing I wasn't able to do, but I wanted to do was because obviously during this time, all of the other Rogue One characters exist, right?
Hmm.
So I
Yeah.
know
Where's
that
Jin right now?
right, yeah, right, Jin Urso, and Baze and Chirrut, and all of them. But there are a couple of books that Jin is the main character in. So, but also Saw is in that book as well. So I want to read up on that kind of during the next couple seasons here of Andor, just to see where people are during this timeline. Um, but yeah, back to um Luthen. Yeah, I think I'm sorry, back to Saw. Yeah, I think he's coming up soon. Like you said, he's got to be 2 episodes away at most. I would think, because they're gonna go somewhere. Obviously, Luthen and Cassian, they'll go somewhere, and then we'll meet up the larger conglomerate of the rebels, and Saw will be there at some point as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm looking forward to seeing this version of Saw. I don't really have, and this is going back to what we talked about already with the expectations of shows. I don't have obviously we know the end point, which is Rogue One, but I don't have a solid idea of the story we're going to explore, which for me
Mhm.
keeps me glued to my seat even more. You know, with Obi-Wan, it was like, okay, we know he's going to like probably meet Anakin. He's going to have to fight Anakin. Like, you knew where the story was headed the whole time. This, it's like, he's got like this forget the numbers and the letters that were associated with the thing that he stole, but he's got this thing that he's stolen, and it's like the plans,
Oh, right.
the early plan for the Death Star, and in fact, I think
Hmm.
there's even a reference to it in the very first episode that it can like destroy planets or something like that.
Oh, uh-huh, uh-huh.
Um, but yeah, I don't have a concrete idea of where we're headed yet with the show, but I'm still very hooked, and I'm still very interested to see what that direction is.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the best thing about the introduction of these shows, because we're very, we're versed in the movies. You got the prequels, sequels, the original trilogy, obviously Rogue One, you got Solo. You have all of these things. And you said it perfectly. You have these endpoints,
Hmm.
of where things ended up or whatever. But to have shows like The Mandalorian, The Clone Wars, or now Andor, and as soon as Ahsoka, they fill in these gaps,
Hmm.
and where we didn't really think we needed them, but then when you see them, you're like, wow, I really enjoyed that, So
Yeah.
I think that's if they continue doing this, yeah, I mean, being a Star Wars fan, it's probably the best time to be a Star Wars fan, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I think it's a super exciting time. There's so much to look forward to, like we already discussed. Uh, but another character from the show that I wanted to discuss a little bit, because I'm not sold on him yet, but I still remain to be swayed as to kind of which direction his character takes as the show progresses. I think his name is Cyril. Uh,
Cyril.
Karn, I think is Cyril Karn.
Oh, the Admiral guy, right? Or
Yeah,
the.
yeah. Which, first of all, can we talk about like the weird, like, not Empire, private, like, contractor company? They had like a name for him, and
Right.
I'm like Mopros or something. Um,
Oh, yes. I'd have to look back, but yeah, I know who you're talking. Just basically the people that are actually doing the work
right.
for the
Well,
Empire,
and
right?
at one point in the show, they even say in the show at one point, like,
Corpos. Were they corpos?
corpos. That's what it was. Yeah,
Yeah, corpos, yeah.
they are like the first line of defense. One of the corpos says this, that they are the first line of defense for the Empire, or something to that effect. Don't quote me if that's the exact quote, but um, so like, and they're in the middle rim, I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly. And so this whole time I'm just kind of like there's no Empire people anywhere, and maybe they'll explain that more in the show, or maybe that's just the
Yeah, yeah.
direction they've taken. Uh, but and that may be an artistic choice as well with the show, like with the grittiness and just the style they've chosen to go with. Maybe putting stormtroopers in there would make it seem too Disney, and they just really wanted to get away from it. So they're like, okay, you know what? Here's this completely different, like, private contractor company. We're
Right.
just gonna like make it feel as little Disney as we possibly can.
Right. Or as little, I mean, to be honest, to like as little Star Wars, really. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you touched on how this doesn't necessarily feel like Star Wars quite yet, you
Right.
know?
Right.
Um, and it's because you don't see the lightsaber, you don't see the white stormtrooper helmets. You know what I mean? So
Right.
where like
Which
in Mandalorian, you would see a Mandalorian,
yeah. Which I
um,
don't even know
armor.
if we will see that in any of the show. Like, sure, there'll be some fighting and
Right.
stuff with, like, once Saw gets incorporated. I would assume we'll probably get some more action sequences and whatnot. Uh, but they may make that decision kind of. I mean, up until the very end of Rogue One, obviously, with the
Right.
with the scene we all know and love now with Vader.
Yeah.
But uh,
Right. Yes.
yeah, I
Wait,
mean,
wait. Vader was in there? Kidding.
yeah, yeah, I left before that part. I missed it.
Like, it was so boring. I just left. I had no idea.
But this Cyril Karn guy, I can't figure
Mhm.
out. I think I can't figure out if they're gonna like eventually make him a good guy
Right.
or.
It's funny you say that because like I lined him up with Agent Callus from Rebels,
Oh,
right? He
okay,
was in
yeah,
Rebels,
yeah, I know.
where
Yeah.
he was, so how it seemed like he was
That's a good
completely
comparison.
on one side, right? He was completely
Yeah.
on one side of the table, or um, but then you kind of see some glimpses. I mean, even here in the first 3 episodes, you see glimpses of hesitation, and especially when they were all going on to Ferrix to find Cassian, and the one sergeant below him was giving this speech that was really, like, let's go get him, and then like it was his turn to talk, and
He's
he
just
was
like,
real like, oh, I'm not sure what to say here. And so I mean, it shows a couple of things. One of them being like, he's not sure
Right.
exactly what he's doing there.
But
he
do you
he
think that's
he reminds.
do you think that's
What was that?
because he's like a double agent or he's morally conflicted?
And see, that's where I don't know. It could be either he's morally conflicted. It could be he's like, I don't know, the general's like nephew, and he
Yeah.
just got the job because of that. One of those things.
Yeah.
So, because he was real like demanding early on, but then when it came to the point of the sergeant asking him, "Are you going to join us?" That's when he kind of dwindled a little bit. He was a
Right.
little bit wary. So I don't know what that means right now. But I can't, and so I don't know if it's a moral conflict thing at this point, or if it's just him being incompetent. you know.
Yeah.
So, because at first you're just like, oh, this guy is going to be a problem. You
Yeah.
know. But then when you see him kind of shrivel, I mean, really, when he was on the planet, trying to find Cassian, it seemed like, well, he's not going to be so much of a problem. And even after they escaped, he was completely shook. He was shell shocked by the
Right.
whole situation. So, what does that mean going on? I mean, I don't know, but I think his character could be pretty interesting if it like. And honestly, I didn't even think of what. I mean, I did think about Agent Callus a little bit, but the double agent part thing, I didn't really think about that. Um.
I think it's
So I mean, you
more
go along other ways.
I think it's more probable that they go like they go the direction of like the gradual, feeling so guilty that he swaps sides storyline.
Like he defects.
But
Mhm.
another option which would be I guess it's not something we haven't seen in Star Wars before. Like what comes to mind is episode 7. Uh like,
Oh right. Mhm.
you're going along this story with Kylo and you're like, okay, he's like moving towards the good, I think. And then it's just like bam, Han Solo's dead.
Yeah. Right.
you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
So maybe there's something like that happens in this show where it kind of like as he's teetering between like which direction do I go, he makes this like impulse decision and he's like all in for the bad side again. Maybe we get that. I don't really see that with this character. Like you kind of
Yeah.
saw it with Kylo.
Mhm.
But I don't know. It remains to be seen. Probably the most of all the characters in the show, I think I'm excited to see Bix the most, but I'm most intrigued by what they choose to do with Karn.
Right. Yeah. Because you could really, because either of those could be the tipping point of a victory or a loss.
Mm-hmm.
Of those two. Because obviously with Bix, now she's got that fire. I mean, although
Yeah.
you could tell she knew exactly how to get through life and what she needs to do. But now that she has drive, she has that motivation. She saw someone she loved get murdered. I don't know if love is the right word, but someone she was with get murdered. You know, um, that I think that's the enough for her to be like, I'm going after the Empire. And one of that whole sequence of the fighting at the end of the third episode, um, them trying to get out of that, um, which was the probably the worst place to have met up with someone, the one with all the chains that were connected to like these
Yeah.
huge huge metal things that just whip around. I've never
Which
ever seen something like that.
can we talk about the physics of that scene for a second?
Right?
The
Yeah.
whole time I'm like, how are these things attached to the ceiling,
Yeah.
and
Right.
how are they swinging
Yeah.
like this? What is going on?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they were swinging sideways. They were,
Yeah,
um, and because normally, you see something, you're like, all right, if I shoot that rope, this will fall on that guy, right?
right.
No.
Yeah,
If you shoot this chain, it's gonna react with this item that'll throw it this way. Yeah, it was completely nutty. So like I was having like a panic attack just watching. I'm like, I'm not sure exactly who's gonna get out of this.
yeah. I don't envy the CG artist that had to work on that scene.
Right. Right. But it was because of the chaos, it was I enjoyed that little scene there more than because there's always going to be a shootout. There's always going to be some type of, like I need to get out of here. Let's get out of the situation type of thing. I've never seen it like that though. I think that was one thing I really enjoyed about this one, is because of that ridiculous freaking room they were in of just of everything metal that falls in every direction. So I
Yes.
thought that was a good one.
One other thought I did want to get your thinking on, because I can see this kind of goes back to like the style of film or TV show they're trying to make, uh, but their use of flashbacks.
Mm-hmm.
I could see for the average watcher this being a complete turnoff. I love when movies do this personally.
Yeah.
So I
Mm-hmm.
enjoyed it a lot, being able to jump back and forth between, the present day and seeing Andor's childhood, being rescued by his mother. I believe her name is Marva, if I
Marva, yeah.
remember
Mm-hmm.
correctly, who's actually played by the same woman. You ever watch the Harry Potter movies? She's actually played by the same woman that plays Harry's aunt, who takes
And
care of him. Yeah,
is that really her? Oh my gosh,
yeah.
that's right. I was trying to
Fiona
place
Fiona
her. That's
Shaw
who it
is her
is. Yeah.
name. Yeah,
I was trying to place her. I could not figure out. Okay. Thank you.
yeah. Uh, no, but anyways, yeah, just seeing like how she rescued him, and but even before that, kind of seeing like the culture and the planet that he grew up on. Which, another thing I was going to point out: where are all the adults? did you have Did you
Yeah.
think about
I
that?
I
Like,
I
like
wrote this down.
yeah,
I said, "What's with Lord of the Flies over here?"
yeah,
Because
yeah,
right, where are every single adult? So like it feels like that's going to be a story because I mean they are heavily leaning on the past and stuff like now they have actually taken off of Canary, so I don't know, maybe they don't get into it too much. Um but at some point I think there's a story there of where
right,
all the parents of these children on Canary are not there for a reason.
right.
And I don't know
I think they
exactly
will go
what it
back.
is. Yeah. I mean, because we got to know what happened there.
Yeah,
But no, that the use of going back and being and giving a little context in what is going on in the present. I
hmm,
think that because and I forget if it started with kind of that flashback, flash forward
yeah. And you're
pattern that they were
confused
going
for the
with.
first time or two that they do it. And then as
Right.
you
Yeah.
start to kind of understand, you're like, okay, this is like present day. This is then.
Right. Yeah.
This is how the stories connect. This is why
Right.
we're
Yeah.
seeing the past in order to
Right.
understand the present.
Yeah. Right. And I think that just show that parallel because in both cases, Cassian's getting off the planet. Right. That's
Mm,
essentially the end.
right.
So the circumstances leading up to it, Marva's um how she was included in both of those, I thought was really good.
Yeah.
Um, but can we talk? Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I think it all started because it showed. I guess that's a dart gun essentially, or blow dart gun that all the
Yeah.
kids had.
Yeah. I thought that was
First
kind
of
of
all,
fun, I guess. Yeah.
whoa! You have all these kids with these darts, and they destroy this. And oh, speaking of non Disney, shooting one of the Canary kids. That
Right.
was
Yeah.
that was still. I mean, even knowing that this isn't going to be like your usual Star Wars movie
Yeah.
or Disney Star Wars movie, that still shocked me that
When
they
it
did that.
kind of
You know.
showed it too, you know what I mean? It wasn't like it
Hmm.
was like an off-screen death. It was like, oh, she just died. You know what
Right.
I mean?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I thought that was a decision that they made. You know, and
Yeah.
um, but again, it speaks to this era of, in the Star Wars universe, this era of, it wasn't clean. The stuff wasn't clean then. There was a lot of questionable decisions being made. And honestly, this is probably more in line of like real world stuff.
Yeah.
How things would actually happen. Um, and then not all put in a pretty package with stormtroopers and and Jedi and Sith
Yeah.
and very very distinct lines. This is where it would land, because if you look at and let's talk about real quick how all the people, the Imperials, that was an Imperial ship that landed there, right? Or that
I would
that
assume
crashed
so.
on Kenari,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And I think
But how all of
maybe
them were like in a yellow green kind of skin tone. I don't know if you noticed that,
hmm.
or maybe my PC wasn't reacting right, but
Are
it didn't seem like.
the kids on the planet?
No, no, no. The Imperials that crashed, that ended up
Oh.
dying, and there was the one
Oh,
that
yes.
shot the
Yes, yes.
Kenari kid.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
ones
so they had
that
like
were
a
already dead.
right. They
Yeah,
were
yeah,
dead.
yeah.
But even the guy that was still alive and shot
Yeah.
the kid, and then got blown up by like 100 darts. Um, again, that was shocking. I'm telling you, Lord of the Flies. That's what I was thinking about when I saw that
Yeah.
part. But yeah, so I don't know if that is of any significance, or because I automatically went to Chiss, so like Thrawn being blue,
Mhm.
now I know they weren't blue, but that was just kind of where I was going. That's where my thought process went. But I just thought it was an interesting like little thing. Like, oh, I wonder what that's about. If that's at first I thought, well, they're all dead. Maybe that's
They were Twi'leks without the head tails.
right. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so I don't know. Just a little thing that I saw there.
Yeah.
Um,
The last thing I was gonna say on the flashback thing was
yeah.
I hope with the flashbacks we I think I would prefer to see more of the why are there no adults on this planet storyline, like before what we've already seen in flashbacks. Then I would prefer to see like the after the takeoff with Marva.
Oh, right.
I would like to see that too, but I'm genuinely really curious where the adults are on this planet.
Right. Yeah.
And I think I would find that maybe a little more interesting. 'Cause I guess
Hmm.
they could go a different direction with it after being rescued by Marva too. Like maybe they go through some kind of training, or I don't know what we'll
Right. Yeah.
see. But
Right.
that was just
Because I
another
mean,
thought I had with the
yeah. Because
flashbacks.
at some point, Cassian has to learn basic, right, or English, right.
Hmm.
So there's going to be that transition of learning how to get around. Um, but what's interesting is, it seemed like. Well, let me ask you this: for
Hmm.
when you were watching it,
Yeah.
when the kids on Kenari were talking, was there any subtitles at all?
Okay. I'm glad you said this because I was almost forgot that I was going to talk about this.
Yeah.
I turned the subtitles on for the third episode because I was curious. I was like, because they weren't showing subtitles when the
Okay.
children were communicating with one another. So I
Mhm.
was curious, like if I turn the subtitles on, what am I going to see? Because I wanted to know what they were saying. Turns out it just says like Canary
Kenari
children
kids, Kenari
talking,
language.
yeah,
Yeah.
or yeah,
Talking in
Canary
Kenari.
language,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and
Because yeah.
and so it's deliberately designed in a way, where it doesn't really matter what they're saying. What matters is they are saying, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. Um,
Right. And yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
no, no, that was basically it. I mean, so yeah, I was curious. So I turned the subtitles on for the third episode, and actually, just a tip as a fan of any show, I think I'm gonna watch with subtitles from now on. Uh,
So
but
I learned that a little while ago, is to watch shows with subtitles, because
yeah,
you get like the names of the
the
people,
names
and
are
you get, yeah,
huge. The biggest thing,
yeah.
I think.
Hmm.
I did that with Game of Thrones, and I went from like not knowing who was who to like 2 episodes later, I felt like I had a pretty good firm grasp on everyone's
Yeah.
name. Same thing with
Right.
Andor, the first 3 episodes.
Right. Yeah. And yeah. So I bring that up because I really like that decision of not, because like I said, I was from episode 1 I started watching it with subtitles on, so I
Mm-hmm.
did know that it was saying like speaking in Canary. So but yeah, it was really interesting to not be able to fully understand what they were saying, but they did such a good job with these kids like acting. You kind of didn't really need it. You knew
Yeah.
what you basically what they were doing,
Mm.
um and I think one thing that we haven't really mentioned is Cassian's sister,
Mm.
um that we've kind of only known about. Just I mean, that was the reason he was in that club, to go
Right.
look for her. And obviously we had seen the last time they were together, potentially, was on Canary. Like, I don't know, I don't think we got a year of when
Yeah, it's
the
not really.
Canary. Yeah,
I
there's
he
no.
looks like he's like 12, maybe something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
I think
something around there. Yeah,
there's a reference in Rogue One where he talks about like I've been
he was
fighting
talking
since
about.
I was 6 or
I was
something like
6.
that.
Yeah,
But then
right, right.
I was expecting him maybe to have a scene where he was that young. But I mean, he's definitely older than 6. So I don't really
Yeah,
know in terms of years old, but
yeah. But even if you give it, he's 10 or whatever, or 12.
right, there's probably like a
And
20-year gap or roughly.
yeah, right, right, yeah.
So,
So so that's the last time, potentially. Like I said, we don't know for sure, but the last time he had actually been with his sister. Again, assuming, you have to assume that's the sister, right? I mean, they wouldn't have,
yeah, I mean, she's
they wouldn't have done, they wouldn't have filmed it like that or cut it together like that if that wasn't a
right.
sister in Canary, right? But um, so yeah, I think that as much as we've talked about Cassian and Vix and everyone else, I think when we like really forgot what was the sister, because that's kind of where we this whole story started. So I'll be interested in seeing how they bring her in, who she is, kind of her story too, because really, it's going to be a completely different, because somehow she ends up on that planet, right?
Yeah.
So on, what was it called? It was Morlana. I think that's where the
Yeah, I think it's more Lana 1, right?
Morlana 1, right? Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
Morlana 1. So in
Which
the Morlana system,
yeah, which means I would assume it's a moon.
right?
Or
Oh, is that what the one is? That they're the
I
moons
think
for that? I always
so.
forget the.
But yeah, like
But
Yavin
yeah,
4.
so yeah, yeah, right.
Yeah.
So we know that she ends up there, but how does she end up going from um Canary to there? That's
Right.
going to be a story in itself too. So um but there's no, obviously, right at this point it was all about Cassian getting his story in line and getting him off of the planet there of Ferrix.
Hmm.
So it'll be, no, I think her story will be compelling in how she got out and how she ended up where she did, wherever she is now.
Yeah. Um one more question I had for you. Thumbs up or thumbs down on the new droid in this show, B2? I think the full
B2,
name is B2
B2
EMO.
EMO,
Yeah.
emo, B2 emo.
B2 emo.
I call them, I call them B2 needy.
There's a funny line like right when you first meet him. I think
Yeah,
I guess he requires like extra battery or power in
right.
order to lie, which I thought was
Right.
really
Yeah. Yeah.
clever.
That was pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because don't we all? I mean, right? I think
Yeah.
that's
It
very, it
really
hits
takes
us
a
close to home.
toll on those droids.
Right. No, I think I thought it definitely brought so the droids have always been, a staple in any Star Wars show, movie, whatever, right? So definitely needed a droid. You needed the droid. And um in like Rebels, obviously you have Chopper and
Yeah.
all of the Star Wars movie, R2 and 3PO. But so I think this was a good addition. I would give him a thumbs up because it gets a it gives so when we were talking about not being Star Wars, that was very much Star Wars. Like having the
Right.
droid, having like
Yeah.
that droid assistant kind of, whatever. So it kind of always links back. You need that have that. If you don't have that, then you
Yeah.
don't have a Star Wars
Provides the
show or
comic
something like that. Yeah,
relief.
yeah. Right, yeah. Um and then like in the sequels you had Dio kind of at the end there.
Hmm.
But yeah, I thought, and I always, whenever I think I know what the droid, how the droid will be, they always, I'm like, oh wow, I never thought of a droid like to be emotional, because I mean that's essentially that's what
Yeah.
I felt like. It was like it would get sad whenever Cassian would leave, or it'd be, what I mean. So it'd have these feelings, which I don't know how you do that, but but I
Yeah.
mean, as far as that particular character of B2, what is it, B2 emo, right?
Yeah, this is the first time where the naming, the nomenclature of the character is like, okay, that's a little bit silly.
Yeah, right. A little too on the nose. I
Yeah.
think you got to back it off a little bit there. But no, I think it was a good addition. I think because it reminds me a lot of K2SO in Rogue One, where there was a lot of sass coming from K2, right? There was
Right.
a lot, K2 was, he would talk back, and he was, because he spoke basic, he spoke English, so you could tell how funny that they that beat that K2 was.
Yeah.
So you had that,
This might be
and
slightly like sacrilegious against Star Wars to say this, but I would argue K2 is my favorite droid. And I know like that's a lot like going up against R2D2 and C3PO,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I think he provides more to the story of Rogue One. Obviously
Hmm.
R2D2 is like the classic and the original and probably the most
Yeah,
lovable. But I
right.
think K2 of any droid, arguably maybe the only droid, perhaps with the exception of R2 or C3PO, that provides significant changes to this
Impact.
impact. That's the word I think I'm looking for.
Hmm.
Impact to the story.
Right, right. I, I can get along board with that. I mean, just the way K2 kind of ended, just like, well, really like that whole, like, you felt like super sad when he died, or when
Yeah.
K2 was destroyed, right? Um, just the way his voice like was slowly going away, after getting shot by the stormtroopers. Um, that like felt like, oh my god, this is now if it were R2 or 3PO, probably the same thing. We never had to deal with those deaths, Um, but yeah, to have that impact, and to be as, and I think that was the best part about K2, is that there was no, it wasn't like, I am, you are my droid, so you will do whatever I say.
Right.
There was questioning. There was talking back to them.
Yeah.
Whatever. So I thought that was, and where C3PO was always just like, oh, this is, I can't do this because of this, and whatever. And R2 again, only, doesn't, he just beeps. So you don't know exactly what he's saying, so there's
Yeah.
no tone in what he says.
He's got a little
But
bit of
with
like
K2,
that sass, but like
right? Yeah,
it's not obviously we don't understand it as sass because he's as a robot and he's beeping.
exactly. So I think, but yeah, I could see that K2 being one of the best droids in the Star Wars for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know where I would land B2 emo at this point.
I like him
I
so
I mean,
far.
I like him. I like him. It's always the classic, like, oh, Cassian's telling me a message that nobody should be hearing,
Yeah.
but everyone's hearing, type of thing, and just like, oh no, whatever. Um, but yeah, I think so. Yeah, what I was getting at is that you had Cassian, who had these two droids that are essentially have those types of chain, like, differences, as far as like when you think of other droids. They have emotions, they have feelings, they have kind of independent thoughts,
Hmm.
that is different from what you would think of like 3PO, for instance. Or I mean, maybe there's a little bit of like, 3PO is always like, oh, I'm shocked, or whatever. Like, that's It's kind of like always the same.
I love your
Um,
C-3PO impression.
is I mean Anthony, if you ever need somebody to fill in, I'm right here.
Yeah, there you go.
Um, but I think so I think to have Cassian have those two droids in his lifetime,
Hmm.
um, kind of mirror each other in a funny way, that they can kind of show those emotions. Now, I haven't seen I don't know every single droid out there, so I'm not one of the completists who know every single model and all that stuff. But just what I've seen on film with Cassian, I think he's had some good droids. He's had some good droids in his life.
Yeah. Well, if you had to give the show as a whole through the first three
Mm-hmm.
episodes, and you can grade the episodes individually if you want,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
if you had to assign a letter grade to the first three episodes, maybe to wrap us up, what would that letter grade be?
I mean, I give it B plus,
Okay.
only because like it's early on. I mean, I could even be swung to A minus, but basically because it's early on. I never like to set that expectation for the rest of the series based off of it. I mean, I know that's the idea of it,
Yeah.
but there were some dog episodes of Mandalorian, for God's sakes. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
they were just like filler episodes of that.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know if but if we're basing it only on these three, if I don't even think about the series as a whole, I mean, I can give it a B plus A minus because it's just like, um, it has. Yeah, I've already been. I'm at the point now with Cassian and a lot of the cast actually, where I'm invested. You know,
Yeah. Uh,
I'm in, I'm in, I'm invested in their story. I'm caught up with Cassian. I'm interested in how pretty much every and one of the coolest scenes was when they were all banging on metal
yeah. I thought
objects
that was cool as
throughout
well.
throughout the planet there,
Hmm.
throughout that area on Ferrix,
Yeah, as a warning
um,
sign sort of thing.
as a warning sign, and the way that Marvel was talking to those two officers, just kind of talking trash to them, essentially, like,
Yeah.
well, you don't want to be here when it ends, essentially, whatever, So um, just like little things like that, there was no spot where I wasn't interested, I guess,
Yeah.
So I'll give it an A minus B plus because it kept me interested the whole time. The way they shot a lot of the things were really cool. The way they cut together the flashbacks and flash forwards and all that, I really enjoyed. And it really made me like, oh, I'm done with episode 3. Like if it
Yeah.
doesn't give you that at the end of an episode, it's just like, you're just like, oh, is this really, like there were, like I said, there were episodes of The Mandalorian where I'm like, I mean, okay,
Yeah.
I don't know why we had to go through all that, whatever.
Right.
Um,
I
but with
realized
this, yeah. But I think but yeah, I enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
I realized what the biggest difference is between I think this show and any of the more recent shows we've had, like Boba Fett or Mando season 2, or I'm trying to think of what else we've seen recently, but
Bad Batch,
uh,
Clone
Bad
Wars,
Batch, Obi-Wan, especially
Obi
Obi-Wan is
Wan, yeah.
this way.
Mhm.
But I think maybe Bad Batch doesn't fall as much in what I'm about to say because it's more new. But Clone Wars falls in this category. Mando season 2 falls in this category. Obi-Wan falls in this category. Every time an episode ended, for any of those shows, you were always kind of felt like, oh man, I hope they don't mess up the next episode. Or at least this is how I felt. I was like,
Yes,
I hope
I
they
know.
don't I hope they don't mess up the next episode. I hope they
Mhm.
don't like do something that ruins the plot or the storyline. Andor is I have not felt that way after 1, 2, or 3. I find myself feeling, man, I'm excited for the next episode rather than,
Yeah,
oh man, I hope they don't screw up the next episode.
right.
And
And
so, yeah, go ahead.
mhm.
Sorry.
No, and I think it goes back to expectations.
Yeah, yeah,
You have these, you know, mainline characters. Obi Wan, couldn't be any, one of the top 4 or 5 of all of Star Wars. Having his own series, and especially Ewan McGregor doing
Yeah.
it. I mean, and then Hayden. I mean, you have these huge names attached to it, and you expect the world. I mean, and I think that was the problem, and I hope they just continue cranking out these TV shows, these longer,
Yeah, me
either
too.
limited series or whatever, because, and we've said this earlier, is that you have so much more time to draw out a story, understand a character, all of this stuff, rather than throwing two different directors at 3 movies, and like,
Yeah.
like it just
Or even something
there's
like
no
Obi-Wan
continuity.
where there was only 6 and you really saw how I think they thought because it was a character we were familiar with, they did not have to do as much character development with the show. And I think
Mhm.
for that reason, the show really suffered. Because it was just like, you were thrown in there and all of a sudden Obi-Wan is not the Obi-Wan you know. You're like, what happened to
Right?
you?
Yeah.
And they don't
Right.
really get you to that point very well. Um, so back to what you said, I am also excited for more shows like Andor, where we get to actually really dive into and explore the origins and the depths of the characters. And I guess to tie all that together to what my letter grade might be, I loved it personally. I Before you gave your grade, I was on an A minus. The more I've like thought about it and heard you talk about it, I almost want to go up to an A. I loved it that much.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
But I think the part of me that wants to take it from an A minus to an A is, and this is bad, but it's the part that almost wants to like spite the average Star Wars, like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
average Star Wars fan. It's like it was good. Don't hate on Andor. It was good.
Right. Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I totally like can see and respect that opinion. So from like a vanilla Star Wars fan perspective, I feel like I'm gatekeeping right now. I don't mean to be, but um,
Ben TV at Twitch, everyone, if you need any comments.
from the vanilla Star Wars fan perspective, I could see how this show would be like a B or a B minus. Personally, I would go almost as high as an A, but I'm very comfortably at an A minus.
I think part of me pulling it even back to a B plus is probably for the same reason why you pull it away from
Yeah.
a B plus. Just because I know that I'm just like, well, is this, because let's be honest, Star Wars has burned us in the past. It's
Sure.
just
I
like,
mean, Boba Fett, that the whole show.
yeah, but, right, yeah. It You really wanted things to pan out, but they just don't. And I understand that not everything is going to be a hit. Um, but when you have these expectations, I mean, Boba Fett, oh Jesus, like there have been people that have been waiting decades, literally decades, to
Yeah.
find out this story. You know, um, and the problem with that is, one, the expectation is way too high, and two, those fans have already made their storylines up. It's much like in not in Last Jedi, where Luke ended up. Just like what, and how Obi-Wan ended up at the beginning of Obi-Wan series. Um, so it's those types of things that will always. And also, I'm a Cubs fan, so I will. Oh, and I'm a Chicago sports fan. So I will always like downplay whatever I see to be like, well, was it really that good? Like, I don't know. I'm not sure. Like, the Bears scored like in the first, one of the first series against the Packers. I'm like, I'm not going to celebrate quite yet, and they lose 27-10. So I mean, this is a very conflicted and hurt
So what you're
Chicago sports fan.
saying is Andor right now is doing very well through the first quarter, and we're just hoping they can finish the game strong.
Right? Yes. But there are 4 quarters to a NBA basketball game. This is all I'm saying. So,
True.
but I mean, if it were to end today, for whatever reason, I was very, very happy with what I saw from Disney Plus.
Yeah. And I should know
Not
this.
sponsored.
I should know this, and I don't. Are we getting 12 episodes of this show, or how many is it?
I thought I saw 12. I'm going to guess at least 10. Um, so I think it's 12 though.
Hmm. Well, maybe while we are investigating that and finding that answer, um, I'm very excited for what the show has to offer. Looking forward to the coming weeks. You will be able to catch us reviewing and talking about the new Andor episode every single week here on the Hoth Hangout YouTube channel, and also hopefully in the future, if you happen to be listening to this in the future, hello from the past. How is the future? First of all, second of all,
No spoilers.
no spoilers. Yeah, and third of all, hopefully coming to a Spotify or Apple podcast near you. So if you're listening to this, weeks in the future on Spotify or Apple, thanks for giving us a listen. And yeah, we love Star Wars, and we appreciate you being here.
Yes, thank you all for listening and watching, and we really do hope you enjoy everything here. Like I said, me and Ben, we just like talking Star Wars stuff, and supposedly other movies and shows. We'll see again how things will end up. But yeah, thank you all.
Also, can confirm it is 12 episodes, and the finale of the first season premieres on November 23rd. So we'll be here each week to cover every new episode.
Thanks, Ben.
Any closing thoughts before we sign things off?
I mean, it would be really corny if I just said like, "May the Force be with you," right?
This is not the podcast you're looking for.
Which was a possible name for the show.
Working title was the podcast you're looking for, but there's definitely at least one other Star Wars podcast with that name.
Right,
so.
yeah. And it does not roll off the tongue.
Yeah,
very well.
Lots of words. Yeah, but thanks everyone for listening. Hope you enjoyed, and we will see you next week on the Hoth Hangouts. Take care, everybody.
Take care. Bye.